Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Team Draft Super League. I'm Ken Jagashira, part of Team Limited Resources, joined by Luis Scott Vargas, part of Team Channel Fireball. Luis, we just saw your match. I know you typed your answer into chat, but Ben was wondering why you didn't cast the Forsake the Worldly on that Unquenchable Thirst in one of those pivotal turns of that game.
I figured if I didn't draw a zombie that turn, it was pretty bad to cast it because I wasn't going to be able to push through any damage anyway. But maybe, and I had a lot of cheap zombies in the deck, but maybe given the situation I was in, it might have been, it obviously would have worked out better to cast it. And maybe it was a mistake not to cast it. That was my logic at the very least.
Right, and it seemed like the altar was just an unbeatable card anyway, so Marshall did have it, so you did get good use out of it, but...
Yeah, but it came out so many turns too late. I think I would have won if I had cast it, so it certainly didn't work out great.
Right, and now, and you might have a little bit to say about this, you did defeat somebody in round one, though. Who
does it really count if it's not on camera?
It counts to some degree. It's the only match win you guys have so
whoever
far,
your
so
third
you better
teammate
count
is.
it.
I guess. Dude, what's the score right now of this draft?
We are up 3-1. Team Limited Resources up 3-1.
Oh, so did Eric lose his round?
Right, I played him.
Okay.
Off cam. He got me game one with a combo of +3/+3 and reach into Fling to 14 me, but I was able to get there with my multiple bounce spells. I have 2 Winds of Rebuke and an Unsummon, and so when he was going to cast his Greater Sandworms off of one of his ramp creatures, it really set him back, and I was able to just push through. So,
wow, we're under the gun then. All right. I guess I've got to defeat you next round, and we got to hope Ben defeats Paul this round. I guess that's who we're watching, right?
Now, remember, the team that loses tonight is still live, as both the teams going into this were 1-0. Now, the one that wins is going to be locked for the top 4. The one that loses still gets another play-in chance. The next match we will be watching is Paul Cheon versus Eric Froehlich.
Oh, okay.
And I had a chance to see Eric's deck. It looks pretty good. I hadn't really seen Paul's deck. What did you think of his?
Paul's deck looked pretty bad. It was okay. The problem was he's kind of like a mix between ramp and just having cheap creatures, like having Ronus' Stalwart, the 2-drop 2/2 that exerts to get +1/+1, and you're like rampaging Hippo deck with Naga Vitalist. Green can end up being a little confused sometimes, but for a team draft deck, I don't think it's too bad.
So what do you think of this format now that it's added Hour of Devastation? I don't know how many drafts or seals you've been able to play with this format, but...
I've done 3 drafts now, and I've been black-white zombies every time, so that's about the extent of my knowledge.
Faster or slower overall as a whole?
I think a little bit slower, not a whole lot. 2 drops are really important still, but there aren't a bunch of good 1-drops anymore. So, and there's like fewer cartouches, so you're less behind when your opponent starts out on a 1-drop.
Gotcha. Any pivotal cards that you passed during the drafting portion? I know I didn't open too many good cards. I just saw a lot of random uncommons, and so I didn't really focus on hate drafting. But was there any hard decision for you?
No, the packs were like, I usually hate draft a fair amount in this sort of format, but the packs were also medium. Like I just kept taking medium black cards out of packs with all medium cards and ended up pretty close to mono black.
Gotcha. Makes sense. All right, well, if we take a look at Eric's deck here over in the sideboard, I think he's just got some bigger creatures and better combat tricks than Paul does. But again, it's going to depend on how well Paul can...
Yeah, I haven't actually seen Eric's deck yet. Let me see what he's got going on.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's just straightforward green-red. He's got some good ramp cards in addition to the multiple fatties at the top end, whereas Paul, when we were going through the deck building portion right after the draft finish and talking about our decks with each other, Paul was looking for an extra card to splash, and Desert Ceradon was like the front runner of cards that he could add, and in fact, it is still in his deck.
All right, yeah, I saw Paul. He splashed a Merciless Javelin against me, which that card is quite good against me. He ended up in a position where he had to block with it, but if he had gotten untapped with it either game, it would have been pretty good.
Right. So now I know this is not true of necessarily older formats, but with the newer sets anyways, team drafting, how important is it to hate draft in general? Because I know in the old days, especially if you had read Huey's article on team drafting, he prioritized hate drafting pretty highly, but I think there are just so many playables nowadays that it's hard to hate draft and still cut off your opponents.
Um, it it doesn't as much depend by format. There are bigger bombs now, like cards like Glorybringer are a little bit like they're fairly unpassable. We didn't run into too many in this particular draft, but you certainly can. I mean, you'll have draft decks and sometimes in this format, team draft decks where you just like have 5 cards in your sideboard that are first picks that you're not going to play.
Right, right. Well, this should be an interesting format, of course. If we take a look at next week's team, I think we have one of the other plans, one of the 1-1 teams. Do you remember off the top of your head? Oh, there we go. The Peach Garden Oath versus Goat Stew. And that's going to be on July 18th. We are taking a week off for the Pro Tour in between the Peach Garden Oath versus Goat Stew and Dem Boys versus whoever the loser of this round is.
Gotcha.
So that should be another interesting one. Sounds like the players are ready, though, so let's go down the match between Paul Cheon and Eric Froehlich. Welcome back to the Team Draft Super League. We are here for the 5th match between Eric Froehlich of Channel Fireball and Paul Cheon of Limited Resources. Limited Resources up 3-1 currently. Luis with the only current win for his team. And looks like both players are on 7. Eric's got a really nice hand here, though, so it's going to be hard for Paul to pull this one out, I think. His deck is much worse than Eric's overall.
Paul has a pretty nice hand for Paul, but I think Eric's hand is a little bit better overall.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, here we see a little bit of the confusion of Paul's got like Hope Tender and Edifice, right? Like a ramp spell and Edifice, which is good in a control deck, and then 2 aggressive 2-drops, which like all these cards are fine by themselves. I have no problem with any of the cards Paul is playing, but they don't combine in a particularly exciting way. Though this turn could be really interesting if Eric chooses to play Channeler, which is the play that makes the most sense. He's not going to block the Initiate's Companion, and Paul can play multiple 2-drops on turn 3.
Yeah, that's a great point. Paul's going to have access to effectively 4 mana, since he can spread it out. 2 mana for the Naga Vitalist or the Ronus' Stalwart pre-combat, and then the second one post-combat. So, nice little swing here. What do you think about Blur of Blades? I've been main decking it a lot in this format frequently. It seems like there are a lot of X ones nowadays.
Yeah, I think that card is. I think I actually underrated it a little in my initial set reviews. I think you should always main deck 1, maybe even 2.
Yeah, it seems like it has a lot of utility. Also, random 1/1 counter synergies. Paul going to go ahead and make that play, leading with the Stalwart, attacking with the Initiate's Companion, untapping the land, and he's going to go play the Hope Tender here. Not to be outdone, Eric looks like he's going to be ramping into a Tenacious Hunter, which
is a nice little combo with Channeler Initiate.
Exactly, nice little synergy there. As long as any creature, not just a creature you control, any creature has a 1/1 counter on it, -1/-1, then it gets Vigilance and Death Touch.
Yeah, so this is the kind of the situation where I talked about, where like Paul has multiple ramp creatures and no cards that cost more than 3. So basically, if Paul could trade like the Naga Vitalist for another pump spell and maybe even the Edifice for a pump spell, I think he'd be a lot happier with the situation. But right now, it's just not working out great, especially since that Tenacious Hunter does have Death Touch. Mm-hmm. Even if Paul uses Gift of Strength, it's still a 2-for-1, and that doesn't sound very appealing. He might have to wait till this Edifice ramps up on counters.
We'll see what Paul opts to play here. Now remember, players have access to the deck lists now, so they know what kind of tricks they might need to play around or what is going to be represented.
Yeah, and Paul wants that Edifice to get up to 3 brick counters as soon as possible, so he's even exerting the Hope Tender to pay for it.
Yeah, it gets to untap 2 lands, so turns his 3 lands into effectively 4 mana. But Eric just has a lot of large beaters in his hand right now. Even the Frilled Wallet does a good job of trading away at the very worst with any of Paul's creatures.
Yeah, now Eric gets to leave up Blur of Blades, so if Paul does go for something with that Initiate's Companion, Eric can get him pretty well.
A pretty good draw for Paul. I think Merciless Javelineer, rather, is going to do some work this game. It's one of the ways I think that he has to kind of deal with larger threats, although it will take a while and it does stymie his mana a bit.
So for mana efficiency, I like playing Blur here on the Initiate's Companion. You used to get a point of damage off your Firebrand Archer, too.
Yeah.
Eric drawing the worst card in his deck, Graven Abomination. That card is, a card you'll play out of desperation more than anything else. Eric has some decent attacks here. He can send in like the Archer and the Frilled Sandwall if he wants to. He also has the option of cycling Greater Sandworm. You don't really want to cycle these, but he's on two of them and only has 4 lands plus the Channeler, which only has 1 more use. Channeler actually does run out. So it's not unreasonable to want to cycle one of the Sandworms here, I think.
We'll see if Paul wants to block first before Eric decides on what kind of play he wants to make. What's the flavor behind Archer not having reach, not being able to block flying creatures, and aiming their bow to the ground?
That sounds consistent. I think the aiming the bow to the ground does kind of explain that.
And Eric just opting to pump up the Frilled Sandwalla here.
So Eric made a neat play there. He cycled mid-combat, and if he had drawn a land, he would just play his 3-drop. But since he didn't, he just pumped the Sandwalla because he really doesn't want to use the last counter on that Channeler while he's got Greater Sandworm in hand. Because he's not going to want to cycle the second Greater Sandworm there. And so now Paul up to 6 mana, but he can play like Javanalier and use Edifice, but because his Initiate's Companion is dead, and because he just took 5 plus the 1 point off the Blur plus the Blur on Archer plus the 2 more points, like Paul's actually kind of behind here, so it's not looking as appealing to try to press the offense.
Yeah, and as long as Eric holds up that counter on the Channeler Initiate, again, you mentioned it earlier, but the Gift of Strength just not looking too ideal in the face of Tenacious Hunter.
Yeah, keeping the Channeler on a counter does help, though. Ooh, Exemplar of Strength could be awesome. Eric could use his Channeler Initiate for mana and then put 3 more counters on it with Exemplar of Strength. That could be a pretty good use of his turn here. So the Edifice is charged up now, which means Paul can use it offensively, but he's still not super close to mounting attacks. Eric on 4 land plus a Channeler, which is usually pretty nice to draw exactly that many mana sources, but he would like to see a land or two to start deploying these threats.
I think we are going to see that play you mentioned. Looks like the Thorn Moloch and the Exemplar of Strength. Oh no, he changed his mind. Abomination and probably the Exemplar, re-putting the counters on the Channeler Initiate, maybe holding up the Frilled Sandwalla. And for a split second, Paula was probably happy that the Tenacious Hunter lost its Vigilance Death Touch, but... yes.
Lord of the Accursed with no zombies in his deck.
He has 1 zombie. He has that, the 4/2, the Beast.
Oh, he has the Rotting Nonsense Beast, whatever it's called. that card is good, I think.
The Lurching Rot Beast, yeah. It cycles.
I actually think that card is good. Like, it's a zombie, which is a relevant creature type. It's got 4 power, which combines well with some of the zombie attack cards, and it's cycling. So I've been pretty impressed with it.
It seems like you're often glutted on 3 drops in this format more than 4s anyways, so it's a nice little curve filler, if nothing else.
But Kenji, you're 2-0 right now, right?
I am 2-0.
Wow. All right. So I've got to take down a 2-0 deck?
I don't know what it's like to be 1-1, actually. I haven't lost a match yet in this Team Draft Super League.
Jeez, must just be. I just say that because Paul, I think, is unlikely to pick up a match based on his deck. Ben's deck is nothing special either, but Paul's deck really has it has an identity crisis, which honestly a lot of team drafts can end up like, or team draft decks, but green just is more susceptible to this. Like, just the ramp spells plus 2 and 3 drops is just not a combo. But maybe I'll throw another match. I did punt against Marshall, right? So, I'm very alive to do so again.
You just want to play again next week, or 2 weeks from whatever, 3 weeks from now.
Really don't, but I don't want to battle dumb boys.
All right, Eric getting on the offensive here. Exemplar of Strength, the Abomination, and the Frilled Sandwalla getting in. Yeah, poor Paul. None of his creatures look very appealing.
Well, on the other hand, Javeliner is pretty nice because he can discard Lord of the Accursed to it to like take down one of Eric's creatures if he wants. Though he might end up trading it off here for like Exemplar of Strength. One reason not to block the Sandwalla is because it does die to Javeliner quite easily, but I don't know if Paul can afford to take a ton of damage either.
Mm-hmm. So Eric obligated to pump the Frilled Sandwalla here.
And Paul also might have made this block thinking it can constrict Eric's plays for the turn, which is reasonable. It just turns out Eric doesn't have anything that's going to affect. He's going to be able to play his Thorn to Moloch, and then next turn, if he draws a land, be able to play a Greater Sandworm. But he has to decide if he wants to shrink the Channeler. And it might actually be time or shrink the number of counters on it, because he's not going to need to tap it for mana that many more times. He can wait to see what Paul does on his turn, but it might be time to just get the Channeler up to 3/4 as soon as possible.
And in fact, we just see it on his end of step on his turn, just to F6 value or maybe play around a -1/-1 on the Javelinier. All right. Paul drew one of his larger creatures, Colossipede, which I actually think got a lot better with the addition of 2 Hour of Devastation packs. There just seems to be a lot of 4 power, 4 toughness creatures.
Yeah, like the Gilded Ceradon and whatnot, and Eternalize.
Exactly. Especially Eternalize, but then you have like the Archer, the Sharpshooters, the 4/4 Vigilance Reach.
So Paul needing to exert Hope Tender in order to have enough mana to use this Edifice, which he's kind of like locked into using. But even if Eric takes a turn off of attacking here, he's getting pretty close to playing that Greater Sandworm, and because of that, his own Hope Tender, he's going to get a chance to. So that Colossipede was a good draw, as you said. It did halt the Exemplar and the Thorn Moloch from attacking.
Paul drew one of his 2 without weakness. I think that's going to be pivotal in Paul being able to kind of stabilize here. He can double block the Sandworm with his larger creatures on one of the following turns, or just use the Gift of Strength, of course. But at least this prevents him from instantly dying to some kind of fling effect, which I was on the opposing side from Eric in one of our earlier games.
Greater Sandworm still gets bricked by an Edifice of Authority, though that does open the door for the Tenacious Hunter to come in, which really doesn't trade for. I guess it trades for like Javelin or Colossipede, or potentially one of the smaller creatures, plus like some Javelin activations or the Gift of Strength in Paul's hand. So this game is definitely not over.
Ooh, oh, wow. A Lethal Sting too. Okay.
All right, that was really good for Paul. Now Paul's the one on 4 land and all spells, and Eric's drawn a couple lands. So, if there's any justice, Paul will draw 5 or 6 land in a row.
And it's important for Paul to take care of the Sandworm now, because again, knowing he has Fling in his deck, does not want to be hit for 7 out of no. Actually 8 because of the Archer too.
Oh yeah, the Archer just gets the last point.
Yep.
Oh wow.
No!
Inferno Jet, that's 7 points of damage with the Archer. And
holy moly.
Eric is 1 creature short of just sending in everything, but Inferno Jet, it means Eric has any spell from Eric will win the game. And let's see, Eric only has
he doesn't
7.
Have too many.
He has 7 non-creature spells, and he's already used 2 of them, so he has 5 left.
Actually, that's still pretty good odds in a 22-card deck, given that Paul's not going to be able to close the gap here quick enough.
So what Eric's doing now, I'm sure, is looking at Paul's deck list to see if Paul's any discard or how many ways Paul has to kill Firebrand Archer. Right. I think the conclusion is that you should just cast Inferno Jet here, but you do want to just cover your bases here.
And this really puts it to Paul. Now he's going to be forced to make attacks instead of sitting back behind his Edifice.
Well, unfortunately for Eric, there's a Merciless Javelin in play, so Paul will probably just kill the Firebrand Archer. The good thing is that a lot of Eric's non-creature spells win in the game anyway.
Right.
Like Fling or Cartouche of Zeal or Kindled Fury and Ronus' Monument. They're all good draws anyway, so this forces Paul's hand a little bit. No good attacks here for Eric. I don't think that Colossus Speed really doing a good job. But it also means that Paul's not making any headway. And I don't really know what he needs to draw to start turning the corner. I guess he could maybe use his combat tricks and in that way attack with Colossus Speed and have combat tricks back when Eric attacks. But but Paul is due for a run of lands here. Though Merciless Javelier helps. He can just throw his lands away.
Kind of negates the land draws as you can just throw them away. Especially he needs to kill the archer now, he knows. He does make the play that you had said.
But now if Paul attacks with anything and Eric has any sort of trick on his turn, then Paul dies.
Right. Uh-oh. Gift of Strength off the top. That's not a bad one.
No, that's quite good. The only danger for Eric is that if he uses Gift of Strength and then Paul uses Without Weakness or Gift of Strength, Eric might get 2 for 1 here. So.
Well, Edifice is probably going to turn off the Hunter once again prior to anything else.
Eric also has to be suspicious. Paul has not played lands. He did discard one last turn, so maybe he's sandbagging more because of the Javelier, but Eric could be suspicious that Paul has one of his combat tricks in hand and maybe just wait on the Gift of Strength for now.
Right. It is a little bit tempting, though. The Thorn Moloch will turn into a 6/6 with the Gift of Strength, meaning even an activation of the Merciless Javelier, it would still eat the Colossipede, barring Paul having nothing else.
Paul's getting his just desserts here. The Splash Desert Ceradon that he can't even really afford to cast.
Super awkward thing, too, is every time he draws a land, he wants to save it for Javelier, but yeah, we'll probably just see it cycled at end of turn, if nothing else. He's got the combo of the Naga Vitalist plus the Survivor's Encampment.
Another thing Eric really would like to draw, he'd rather draw Fling. That's his best draw by far. But drawing Ronus' Monument could be pretty good, because then if he draws a subsequent creature, and his deck's like almost all creatures, that plus Gift of Strength would probably be enough to force through the last point of damage.
Right. And so do you think Paul's going to cycle here at end of turn? Because he can't ever cast the Ceradon. Huh? Maybe
I'm surprised he didn't. If he didn't cycle there, that means his plan is to cast it in a few turns. I guess he's not really looking for a whole lot else. Now he can exert the Hope Tender in order to cast it and still have Edifice up. It's not like it's that big of a finish, though. Eric can just block with Exemplar of Strength.
All right, let's see if Paul makes that play.
One thing that does not work out well for Paul if he does make that play is that Eric then will use this opportunity to likely play Gift of Strength. He can attack with like Exemplar and Thorn Moloch or something along those lines, perhaps just one of them, and have a good combat interaction there.
Yeah, that makes sense. It looks like Paul's just going to pass instead, valuing holding up the multiple tricks. Uh-oh. So
Cartouche of Zeal is interesting. So if Colossepede's unable to block, Cartouche also triggers the Thorn Moloch and makes it a 4/4. Or 3/3, and plus if he puts it on the Moloch, it's a 4/4.
Right.
Moloch, because it's going to be a 4/4 off this gift, maybe Eric actually just puts Cartouche on like Hope Tender or Channel Initiate, just one of his other creatures. And
you could try baiting here too, because Paul could kill a 2/2 in response by discarding 2 cards. But it looks like he's not going to do that. Instead putting it on the Exemplar of Strength.
Oh, interesting. So by putting it on Exemplar of Strength, that means Eric wants a creature that can tangle. Now he has 2 creatures in play that can tangle with Colossipede even after this turn, even after when Colossipede can block again. So Eric now getting to attack with whichever of the green creatures doesn't get edifice, the hunter or the exemplar, plus the thorn moloch, which is a 3/3 about to be a 4/4. So Eric could actually potentially attack with everything. And so Paul has a bunch of tricks though, so this might not work out well for Eric. We'll see how Paul ends up blocking and how these tricks end up playing out.
That's going to be who bites first, because one cast respond with another, but then Paul has the second trick.
So as these blocks are lined up, the hunter is going to trade with the Javelinier, and the Hope Tender is going to get eaten by Lord of the Accursed, and then Eric's going to get chump blocked by the other two creatures. So Eric might just pass. First of all, he's going to pass and let first strike happen. All right, so Paul is going to make his Javelinier indestructible, which Eric can then use Gift to keep his Tenacious Hunter alive, or use Gift to win the fight over Lord of the Accursed. Then Paul can use his own Gift to essentially counter Eric's.
First strike still hasn't resolved yet, so we'll see if that Naga Vitalist gets killed before any other action occurs here.
That's actually going to make it a little harder for Paul to cast this Desert Showdown, which is funny.
Yeah.
So it's on Paul right now. So he's deciding whether he wants to cast Gift. Looks like he's going to.
All right, and he's going to pull the trigger on the Hope Tender.
Okay, that worked out a lot better for Eric. Basically, Eric got a little bit of an advantage there because he passed before first strike, which is just correct and free, because then he would have the opportunity to cast his own Gift later. And Paul just pulled the trigger and played the Gift. So now Eric can play his own Gift and defeat the Hope Tender with Channel or Initiate. I think that's going to end up being better. Alternately, he could use it to save his Tenacious Hunter, but it wouldn't kill the Merciless Javelinier. And that will end up making it so Eric can basically play another Tenacious Hunter by replacing his, or use Gift to kill Hope Tender and play a Channel or Initiate. And I think with Paul at 1 life, having an extra creature in play is probably better, but it's close.
Yeah, it's been an interesting game though so far. Eric trying to find that last point of damage.
Eric's checking to make sure his first strike stops. Let's see. All right. So regardless, this Torpid Moloch wants to, or Prowess Moloch wants to kill the Naga Vitalist. So we'll see that happen first, assuming Eric has first strike. Because Eric wants to make sure that Paul has no mana up and can't do anything else.
Got an update on the back table. Ben defeats Paul 2-0, putting you guys up to 2 team wins.
Yeah, Ankylosaur's got it. You're tearing up at how beautiful this game is. This is a good game of limited. Like, there's combat tricks, there's back and forth, there's Eric getting horribly flooded but still persevering against Paul's perfect draws. You know, just all the classics.
The usuals.
Okay, so Gift resolved on the Hope Tender, but I still think first strike damage has to happen. Can we do a little first strike?
Let's see, what other matches do we have coming up? So we have Paul and Eric playing right now. Ben just defeated Marshall. Next, we're going to have Marshall versus Eric. Paul versus Ben. So we're only going to play if it's absolutely on the wire, the final round.
Oh, okay, so we're probably not going to play.
Yeah, as soon as Paul wins the next 2 games and loses this one, and then Marshall wins versus Eric, easy.
I see.
Oh, I like this play from Paul. He gets to exert 2 of his land. Wait, did Eric use the gift of strength? No. So he's using it now.
He's using it now. He's just not going to risk it, I guess. And he's going to use it on... Okay, he's using it on his own Hope Tender to kill the Lord of the Accursed.
Wait, I'm just confused as to why Paul untapped 2 lands then and exerted his creature that was going to live.
Maybe he thought it was a good play at the time. I don't know.
Threat of activation of Javelineer, that I don't think that made any sense. Oh, luckily he did draw a creature though, yeah.
Well, he would still live because of Edifice, but you know, after all this excitement, could we just have Eric draw a Fling? Like that would be the that would be the optimal situation here. Paul can actually start attacking pretty soon here.
Yeah.
He's got bigger creatures than Eric does now.
Oh, he might actually do it right now to get in with the Colossopede. Force Eric to draw something.
Yeah, I think the Javelineer.
That makes more sense.
Like I said, it doesn't matter because Eric's going to draw a Fling, but Desert of the Indomitable. We get another out.
I actually think Paul probably needs to kill the Bloodlust Insider, though, with the Javelineer next turn.
Yeah, he can wait to see if Eric plays a creature first, but he does at some point want to kill that.
Let's see if Paul has any life gain in his deck. Oh, man, the cream draw for Paul would be Painful Lesson. But it doesn't look like he has any way to gain life. All right, and like you mentioned, Eric, all he has to do is draw a Fling to get there.
But he doesn't have tons of time.
No. And he doesn't have any other direct form of damage beyond the Inferno Jet and the Firebrand Archer, which both are already in the graveyard.
And if Eric takes this and falls to 8, then Paul has a lot of routes to lethal next turn. Eric might actually want to chump with the Bloodlust Insider. It's actually a chance Paul wanted to just shoot down the Insider before passing the turn. Because now that Eric gets a chump block,
yeah, that's 5 damage gone.
You might get another draw step, and it's not like the Javelineer was killing the other things.
Come on, Paul.
Fling.
Okay, that's good. Unbiased commentary, of course.
Oh, yeah. I'm not rooting for a particular team. I'm just rooting for pure magic.
Oh, we might see the double discard? Kill a 2/2? All right, I like this.
Kill a 2/2, make one unable to block, attack. So Paul's going to go for lethal here by just using Javelineer on his turn and Edifice.
And it's going to work out. All right. With Eric having nothing but lands in hand, Paul probably just doing the last look over of the deck list.
Yeah, and if Eric had Fling, Paul would be dead anyways, and I think that's Eric's only instant speed interaction. So.
Yeah, Blur of Blades, Gift of Strength already in the graveyard. He could have a Kindled Fury, but that's irrelevant. All right.
Wow, like Paul wins a game.
Delicious. All right, taking a look at the players' sideboards. What's coming in and what's going out?
Judging by Paul's main deck, he can't really have a whole lot in his sideboard.
No.
Eric also does not have a whole lot in his sideboard. He could put in Gilded Ceradon. He only has the 1 desert though, so it's kind of weak without it. Looks like Paul is bringing Dissenter's Deliverance in order to kill Ronus's Monument. Probably not Graven Abomination as much. It's possible Eric wants to board out that Abomination in for just the 5-mana 4/4 just because Paul has the Merciless Javelineer, which is going to pick it off. Wow, look at that. And Paul boarding in the Moaning Wall. I mean, it's a magic card. It cycles too. It looks like Paul decided against it. He has a little bit too much self-respect.
I think he was trying to buff up the targets for his Lord of Accursed, extra zombies in the deck.
Yeah. Ooh, Eric with a great hand, and wow, looks like Paul has to mulligan. This is unfortunate. I was just hoping for just good, clean magic, but given that Paul only has a one-land hand, Paul just snapped it off.
So he has 2 cycling cards in his hand and a Hope Tender on the far. 3 cycling cards even.
But they all cost 2 to cycle. He does have a 1-drop, but Eric getting in the free point of damage with the frilled Sandwalla here.
Eric with a pretty nice one too. Channeler Initiate and Ronus's Monument both effectively taking down the cost of the Greater Sandworm. We'll see if Paul can hit the land. Oh.
It's a shame, but Paul didn't hit his land drop, so we're going to have not much of a game here, and unfortunately have to move to a game 3. I was, hoping Paul would get there on that draw step just so we could see more interesting magic, but it looks like he's just going to get run over by Eric.
I don't actually think that's true. Eric's not doing much beyond that Ronus's Monument. If Paul just hits a land, he already has the Lethal Sting in hand for the Greater Sandworm, too.
Yeah, you're right, actually. We have a chance for a good game. Yeah, maybe Eric won't draw anything. That would be cool, because then we could see these great players, with a good back and forth here.
Land needs to be here, though. There it is, the swamp.
There we have it.
Okay.
All right, so what is Paul's first play? I guess it's going to be Hope Tender, right?
Right.
Yeah, if Paul doesn't Paul can kill his own frilled Sandwall, or he can put a counter on his Hope Tender. Oh wow, he's just playing the Initiate's Companion?
Whoa. So I think he wants to offer the trade with Sandwalla.
Seems likely. Okay, Hope Tender was a very good draw for Eric. Because it costs 1 off the Ronus Monument, also ramps to the Greater Sandworm, and gives the frilled Sandwalla +2/+2. The game's not over yet. You don't have to get that emotional. It's just a Hope Tender.
Got a cat hair in my eye right now. It's probably from the Initiate's Companion.
Eric's just going to go for max damage here, I suspect.
Yeah, hitting in for 5 with that Sandwalla. All right, another land off the top for Paul.
They call him Lucky Cheon for a reason.
I think it was a pretty risky play for Paul to have ran out the Companion, though, because, well, I guess Eric would need a cheap creature to cast in addition to holding up 2 mana to be able to threaten a 5/5 like he did, but he did have it.
Yeah, Paul, I think, thought that the Companion was going to be able to trade for the frilled Sandwalla there, but Eric thwarted that plan. So Paul is going for max value here by tapping out before attacking with Companion, but all that it lets Eric know is that it's completely safe to go for the Kindled Fury play here.
Mm-hmm.
It seems fairly likely you'd want to do that just to deny Paul the mana and trade with your combat trick when it's safe, because Paul has multiple combat tricks which make it so Kindled Fury doesn't work.
Yeah, this is kind of brutal, as now Paul doesn't get a hold open the Without Weakness or the Sandwalla activation.
Yeah, Paul's deck's certainly not Without Weakness, as we've seen so far. Because he's got 2 copies of it, is what I mean. So 3, 4, 5, 6 mana. We're not quite at Greater Sandworm. We're 1 short. Paul looking like... if you want to excuse yourself for a second, I can handle commentary while you de-cat hair yourself.
All right, I will be right back.
You just look like you're dying over there. All right. Now that Kenji's gone, it's time for me to bring out what I really think about commentary, which is that I hope Eric Froehlich wins. That was probably obvious. So Eric is looking now. He's going to be able to attack with the Frilled Sandwall at the very least. He can attack with Hope Tender if he wants, and offered a Gift of Strength to trade. for Paul's Hope Tender. Paul's probably not even going to block with Hope Tender. So it's kind of close. Also, Eric has a Cartouche of Zeal in hand, which combines quite well with Ronus' Monument because his creatures are so cheap, or a little bit cheaper at the very least. And that means that if Eric draws any creature that costs like 5 or less, he can Cartouche it as long as it's green. And if he draws a land, he can play the Greater Sandworm. So Eric's sending everything. He's only going to have one trick up. So if Paul blocks Sandworm, Frilled Sandwalla on Frilled Sandwalla, and Hope Tender on Hope Tender, Eric has to lose one of them. But, oh, this is not going to work out well for Paul. Ooh, that is a shame. That is a shame that he's going to get blown out by Gift of Strength incredibly badly here. And that'll almost end the game, because now Paul's down to 10. He can play... He can't even play anything. He can play a Beneath the Sands, is the best he can do. He can play a ramp spell. And because the Lethal Sting is now turned off, that can get Paul to Rampaging Hippo next turn, maybe, or Colossal Speed guaranteed. But against having no plays against an opponent with 3 creatures in play when you're at 10 life, and Eric has red Cartouche in hand, things are gonna not gonna work out well for Cheon. So he's cycling to hope to draw a 2-drop creature, which he did. Ronus is Stalwart. They do call him Lucky Cheon for a reason, and that's going to open the door for us. Eric to really draw any creature here or land. So now he can play Greater Sandworm this turn. So he can attack with or he doesn't even have to attack first. He wants to play the Sandworm, pump the Frilled Sandwalla, get in for 2, and then next turn Paul's going to be forced to Lethal Sting the Greater Sandworm and basically die to the rest of Eric's creatures. Though I guess the Hope Tender will be exerted. And I've never seen a Greater Sandworm off 4 mana before, or 4 lands. Ronus' Monument pulling double duty. Dropping Paul to 7. Again, he's priced into Lethal Sting here. I guess he can cast Colossipede instead, but that seems a lot worse. So Lethal Sting, and then he can block one of the 2 creatures Eric has, except Eric's going to have the Cartouche of Zeal. If Eric draws any creature, he just wins. Well, except for maybe that one. Even without a creature, he can Cartouche. He can attack for exactly 7 unless Paul has another trick here, which Paul does not. And we are getting ourselves a game 3.
Did I miss too much riveting action here?
No, just Cheon just getting annihilated, basically. So nothing we all haven't seen before many, many times.
Nothing out of the usual.
Assuming you watch his stream, that is. You don't see as much of that on PT coverage for obvious reasons.
All right, the Moaning Wall comes out. Wait, was it already out?
I thought it was already out.
Oh my.
All right, comes back in.
Lord of the Accursed, the sideboard pull-out.
Oh, I'm not being savage at Cheon. I just mean he's doing commentary at the Pro Tour, so we're going to get to see him in the booth.
All right, here we are for Game 3 between Paul Cheon and Eric Froehlich. Team Draft Super League.
Oh, man. Paul has a great draw, and Eric has a very medium one. This is nonsense.
Well,
ooh, Hope Tender. Hope Tender's good.
If Eric does nothing but draw creatures, he's going to be in good shape with that Ronus' Monument.
Oh, yeah.
Paul
At least Paul drew a Naga Vitalist there. Ooh, this is actually great. He can play the Initiate's Companion, haste it up, and then if Paul trades, fine. And if Paul doesn't, Eric gets to play the Frilled Sandwalla. Somehow Eric's like Trond here. All right. Well, the trade is still acceptable. Though, Harrier Naga pretty good. Paul's hand...
Oh my gosh.
Ooh, that was a good one.
Yeah, Eric just drawing running creatures on curve here. He's going to be able to play a turn 4 Bitterbow Sharpshooters. It's
going to get stung, and Paul obviously is just on 3 lands and all great spells, as Cheons are wont to do. But I think Eric's still looking okay here. Because Eric can attack... It's actually kind of close, because Eric can play the Sharpshooters. He misses out on the Ronus' Monument trigger, but he does get to attack for 4.
Right.
And then next turn, Paul... The thing is that's not great. the drawing that second Harinaga was really good because that turns Paul, basically kind of mediocre draw into one that can actually apply enough pressure. I think Paul might be ahead here.
Eric might be in full race mode, though. Get that damage like you had mentioned. Hope Tender and Frilled Sandwall potentially here. Attack for 5 with the Insider.
Yeah, that's going to work out better. So I hope Eric does it. Because that means that Eric has a Frilled Sandwall back. Wait.
Oh, he's going to...
Attack for 4? That seems worse than attacking for 5 and having a Hope Tender untapped. But there's that Moaning Wall.
Excellent sideboard option by the aggro Cheon here.
Yeah. So this works out still reasonably well for Eric. I think he missed a point of damage there, but Paul can attack with the Harinagas. Eric gets to use Frilled Sandwall on a turn where he didn't want to use his mana anyway, and then Paul can play a trick, but that taps Paul out. This is the turn where he wanted to draw a land, so he could play Gift of Strength and Naga Vitalist in the same turn.
Indeed, Eric. Gonna make that block. We'll see if Paul pulls the trigger.
Yeah, Paul definitely... I guess he could play Without Weakness also. He can play one of his tricks. I guess Without Weakness is actually the slightly weaker one, so it makes sense. He wants to keep the Harinaga around, though. I would be pretty surprised if he let it die, because if he loses a Harinaga, he doesn't really have the ability to finish this game. So Eric really needs to draw a Greater Sandworm here. If Eric can draw something gigantic, then I think he's in pretty good shape.
Yeah, Paul might be taking, upwards of 8 damage this turn. One card left in his hand, though, so...
So Paul takes 8 this turn, but Eric then is going to take potentially 5 back if Paul goes Lethal Sting, attack for 5, or Paul just attacks with both and uses Gift of Strength.
Right.
But Paul's still on 1 spell a turn. Basically, this game is going to come down to whether Eric can draw 2 spells in a row here, because otherwise Paul does have 5 spells in hand, even if they're like kind of bad ones like Naga Vitalist and Moaning Wall. That's going to overpower Eric. So Paul opting to use the Gift of Strength here.
And Eric going to go ahead and make that block. Yeah, this does eat up Paul's whole turn, though. You mentioned 1 spell when he's on 3 mana.
All right, so this is the turn where Eric needs to draw Greater Sandworm.
Uh-oh. That's not bad. It just doesn't force in the damage immediately.
No, but it combines very well with Ronus' Monument.
Yep.
Greater Sandworm would have not just been game, but real close to it. Actually, yeah, it would have been very close to it. So Eric can attack Paul down to 5 and then have Gift of Strength and basically have lethal out with Ronus' Monument. He'll take 6 if Paul attacks back, but I like the all-out attack here. I don't think there's any other way to play it.
Yeah, this does put Paul dead on the backswing if nothing is developed for him. But, of course, we know he can play 2 spells now. Okay, that was a good draw.
Eric just needs to draw any creature. Any creature, and he just wins. Paul is going to... Assuming Paul attacks with both his Harinagas. Because if Paul attacks Eric down to 5, plays 2 creatures, then any creature wins with Ronus' Monument and with Bloodless Insider.
Right. Yeah, this is going to be another close one. It all depends on what Eric's next draw step is.
So if Paul wins this, we have to sweep to defeat you guys. If Eric wins this, we only have to go 2-1. But then you would also have to go 2-1.
Right.
This is a big turn here because Paul also. So if Eric had a Greater Sandworm or something like that, he would have slammed it. Paul knows Eric's on empty except for potentially a trick. Oh, Fling or Inferno Jet are also just games. Yeah, so I like Paul's attack here. Like, you just hope Eric bricks off on a draw step and then you can win afterwards.
Right.
All right, come on. Like, we really deserve this is the thing. Like
deserve.
Yeah, I feel like we've earned it. So.
Oh, that does it.
Yes, that does it. Oh,
Cartouche
nice.
on the Insider. Yep. Both of his creatures are now lethal in conjunction with the Gift of Strength. Oh, no.
Well, Eric pretty much had to draw any red card to win the game. So that was pretty nice. Well played by Eric. So, and we've evened it up to 3-3.
All right, so Eric Froehlich's going to take that match over Paul Cheon 2-1. That evens things up. We were ahead 3-1. Team Limited Resources up 3-1 with you, Luis, only having the sole win, but your teammates managed to pull it out this round, and so we're going to play. I
guess variance caught up to you guys, and we're back on even footing here.
We get to play at least 2 more rounds of Magic. Next up, if I'm checking, is it Marshall and Ben just played, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we have Marshall and Eric up next, and that will be round 7, I guess match 7 of the Team Draft Super League. Don't go anywhere. Please stay tuned.
Well, I'm saving my easiest match for last, so we'll see. We'll see if I have to play it.
Looking for a challenge? Magic Online offers monthly limited and